It didn't start with a bang. It started with silence. No explosion, no fireball, just a ripple in the fabric of the universe, quiet, ancient, and invisible. A faint murmur of cosmic radiation, traveling for millions of years across starless space, finally brushing against Earth like a ghost's breath. Most of the world didn't notice, but something in the ocean did. At the Atacama Space Array in Chile, deep in the dead hours of night, the radiation was logged as nothing more than a minor pulse. Just a soft spike in the low-frequency background, a statistical shrug. A dying star's last breath, harmless and distant. But 7 miles beneath the Pacific Ocean, inside the Mariana Trench, the deepest wound in Earth's skin, something shifted. Not a quake, not a tremor, a movement. For centuries, that darkness had been undisturbed. No sunlight, no sound. Pressure so crushing it could shatter steel in seconds. It was a place beyond life, or so we believed. But down there, in that lightless grave, something had been sleeping. And now, it was waking up. The first to notice was a sonar buoy stationed near the trench wall. Its log captured a rhythmic thump, faint, pulsing alive, like a heartbeat. At first, scientists blamed shifting tectonic plates, a collapsing thermal vent, maybe even rogue submarines. But the pulses came every 6 hours, exactly, with precision no natural process could match. They didn't echo like rock or rumble like magma. They resonated. Then the lights began to change. Off the coast of Japan, a deep-sea drone mapping the Aizu, Bonin Trench glitched mid-transmission. The final frame recovered from its feed showed murky water swirling into a perfect spiral, something massive moving in the background. Not swimming, rising. By morning, the drone was gone. In Honolulu, Dr. Mariana Cho sat hunched over monitors in the NOAA Tsunami Warning Center, her eyes flicking between seismic readings and sonar charts. She wasn't a conspiracy theorist. She was a scientist. Calm, precise. But even she could feel it. The ocean wasn't just moving. It was reacting. She traced the microquakes forming a near-perfect ring around the Pacific tectonic plate. Not outward, like something exploding. Inward, like something pulling, gathering. She reached out to an old colleague, Dr. Yusuf Kader, a theoretical biophysicist with a reputation for studying impossible biology. His response came hours later. No greeting, no explanation. You're not measuring an earthquake. You're listening to a signal. Mariana's heart skipped. The next night, the sea lit up. It began near Guam, a glowing spiral blooming across the surface like a living constellation. Bioluminescent plankton igniting in geometric waves, as if the ocean itself had started breathing light. Satellite footage was breathtaking. But beneath that beauty lay something else, something ancient. The patterns weren't random. They followed the same frequency as the pulses. A code, no, a call. Not from above, but from below. The glow lasted just under 17 minutes. And then, darkness. 3 days later, a submersible was launched. Nereid Alpha, American-made, manned, armed with sensors and cameras meant to survive the impossible. Its mission: descend to 11,000 meters. Enter the trench. Find the source. Cho watched the live stream from a secure NOAA feed. The descent was smooth until they hit 10,900 meters. That's when the ocean changed. Visibility dropped to 0. Not from silt or movement, but from density. The water itself had grown heavier, thicker, as if it were reacting to their presence. Then the sound. Low. Inhuman. Like a whale's song fed through a machine, slowed down to a crawl. It wasn't part of their sonar. It was around them. And then it was in the sub. The comms flickered. Lights dimmed. Instruments froze. Then nothing. For 36 hours, the world waited. And then Nereid Alpha resurfaced. Its exterior was scorched, melted in streaks that curved like claws. The inside? Soaked. But not with water. With slime, thick, iridescent, glowing faintly blue. The pilot was alive, but speechless. Eyes open, fixed, comatose. But on the inner glass of the viewport, scratched from inside, was a single phrase: "IT knows the stars." Security teams sealed the sub, quarantined the data, but Cho had already cloned the last audio stream. When she filtered out the static, her breath caught. It wasn't just noise. It was a song. Deep, purposeful, and layered with tones no creature on Earth could produce. It wasn't just cosmic radiation. It was a key. And somewhere in the pitch-black miles beneath the ocean floor, a lock had turned. The footage was never supposed to exist. Officially, Nereid Alpha systems were offline after the blackout. But deep in the sub's diagnostics cache, hidden beneath layers of corrupted metadata, Dr. Mariana Cho found 34 seconds of corrupted thermal imaging. Blurry, fragmented, but visible. The first 10 seconds were static, then movement. Not mechanical, organic. At the edge of the frame, something vast shifted. Not swimming, expanding, like the slow opening of a colossal eye. Filaments drifted in the water, some biological, some metallic, glinting with bioluminescent threads. And behind it all, a shape that defied symmetry. A body too large for the screen to hold. There was no vertebrate structure, no fins, no known anatomy. It didn't evolve on Earth. The moment Cho saw it, something primal in her mind recoiled. This wasn't discovery. It was intrusion. We hadn't found it. It had allowed us to look. She sent the footage to Cater, encrypting the file 3 times. His reply came in under an hour. It's not just alive. It's intelligent. And it's listening. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, the ocean began to change. In the South Pacific, a cargo freighter en route to Auckland was forced off course when its compass began spinning uncontrollably. The sea around it grew darker, not with night, but with shadow. Entire schools of fish surfaced, dead, eyes clouded, as if something had burned through their minds. In the Indian Ocean, a French research vessel recorded a sudden spike in electromagnetic interference, then picked up a series of sonar pings, each identical to the ones recorded by NOAA. Except these weren't bouncing back from the trench. They were coming from below Madagascar. By week's end, 11 separate deep-sea anomalies were logged. All identical, all symmetrically placed across ancient fault lines. It was as if the planet had pressure points, and something was pressing against them from beneath. But no one knew why. Cater did. In a voice message sent to Cho in the dead of night, he sounded breathless, terrified. This wasn't random. The radiation pulse, Mariana, it wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't natural at all. It was targeted, like a signal beamed straight into the ocean's brain. Cho stared at the waveform analysis he'd attached. The energy spectrum of the cosmic burst matched almost perfectly with a resonance band found in certain deep-sea bacteria known for surviving inside hydrothermal vents for millions of years. And then the pieces clicked. This wasn't radiation waking up some monster. This was something using the radiation. A cosmic injection, triggering life at the bottom of the ocean like a seed remembering what it was meant to become. In other words, it wasn't evolution. It was activation. Cho wasn't the only one starting to panic. Military assets were being moved into position. Submarines sent silent across the Pacific. Satellites were repositioned. No statements. No alerts. Just motion behind the curtain. The world's governments weren't preparing for discovery. They were preparing for containment. But by then, it was far too late. In Alaska's Aleutian Trench, a deep-sea mining rig reported a series of strange mechanical failures. Instruments stopped working. Drill arms froze mid-motion. Lights blinked in and out. Then came the noise. A long, vibrating hum, felt more in the bones than in the ears. It lasted 9 minutes. The rig's crew described it as a warning, though they couldn't say how they knew. When a camera drone was sent down the shaft, it captured something impossible. Glyphs, etched into the rock, glowing faintly. Not scratches. Not natural erosion. Symbols. Language. Buried under miles of ocean for untold time. The rig was evacuated. The footage buried. But not before someone leaked it to Cho. She watched it alone, Lights off, hand trembling. The symbols weren't just decoration. They pulsed. Slowly. Almost like a countdown. But to what? That night, she couldn't sleep. Her ears rang. Her skin prickled. And then she heard it. From outside her apartment window in Honolulu, a sound coming from the ocean. It shouldn't have been audible. Not at that distance. But it was. Soft. Rumbling. Melodic. Like a lullaby. She ran to the balcony. The sea looked normal. Come even. But her instinct screamed. And when she glanced at her phone, she saw dozens of missed calls from Cater. She picked up. He didn't say hello. It's not just beneath us, Mariana. It's around us. It's not one creature. It's a network. A hive. A consciousness. Something that stretches across the trenches like roots under a forest. And it's waking up in pieces. He paused, then whispered the one thing that truly shattered her composure. And it's remembering what we did the last time. That line hung in her skull like a curse. Because if these things had been here before, that meant Earth wasn't just home to ancient life. It was a prison, and the radiation hadn't breached the walls. It had opened the door. They called it a deep-sea bloom, an event so massive it painted the Pacific like blood spilled beneath a microscope. Satellite images caught it first, ribbons of red swirling across thousands of nautical miles, twisting through shipping lanes and coastlines like veins. But this wasn't algae. It wasn't any marine life science had a name for. It was alive, yes, but it didn't belong to Earth's taxonomy. Marine biologists who analyzed water samples couldn't classify the cells. They had no nucleus, no carbon base, no DNA strands. Under the microscope, they shimmered like liquid crystal, shifting color and shape with every vibration of sound in the lab. And when a technician whispered too close to the sample, the cells turned. They aligned, like they were listening. The world above still didn't know. Governments were clamping down on information, but ports were shutting quietly. Fishing crews went missing. Entire communication cables went dead in sections of the South China Sea. And then the ship surfaced. The Barrows Sphere, a research vessel lost 5 years ago off the coast of Micronesia, drifted into view near the Solomon Islands. Not a single SOS. No crew spotted. Just a rusted hull slick with barnacles and a thick, black secretion leaking from its seams. An Australian naval team boarded it under full biohazard protocol. Inside, they found no bodies. Only wet clothes laid out in perfect circles, like someone had peeled themselves out of existence. But in the ship's central lab, someone had left a single sentence scrawled on the wall, written in what looked like blood and sea salt. It speaks in oceans. We listened. Now it's our turn. The footage was buried. Cho got it through an encrypted message from an anonymous military contact. And that night, the dreams began. Not hers, everyone's. Across continents, thousands of people reported shared visions. Dreams of drowning without panic. Dreams of sinking through miles of black water and emerging into a city made of bone and coral, spiraling like a cathedral built by no human hand. The city pulsed, sang, and in its center stood something vast, faceless, waiting. Sleep studies across Europe confirmed the impossible. Hundreds of patients describing identical dreamscapes, down to the structures, the scent of brine, the feeling of being watched from within. Psychologists called it a mass hysteria event. Cho knew better. The radiation hadn't just awakened something biological. It had awakened something cognitive. Something that didn't speak in words, but wavelengths. Not communication. Infection. Cater called it cognitive resonance. A phenomenon where non-human intelligence bypasses language entirely, embedding itself into the subconscious. Mariana, he said, voice cracking through a secure call. It's not coming for us with claws. It's coming through our minds. That week, people began to disappear. Not in crowds. Quietly. Always near water. A marine biologist in San Diego. A port inspector in Tokyo. A diver in Cape Town. They were last seen walking alone toward the sea, then never again. Security cams showed them undressing slowly, calmly, smiling. and stepping into the surf like it was calling them home. In each case, their final phone calls contained garbled messages, echoes of underwater noise, rhythmic pulses, and then the first surfacing. It happened at night near the Mariana Trench. A Japanese surveillance satellite caught the footage. For exactly 11 seconds, something broke the surface, a mass the size of a small island, coated in bioluminescence, trailing threads of glowing material like drifting tendrils. It had no eyes, no face, no symmetry, but it was watching. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it sank. The satellite that captured the image malfunctioned within 30 minutes. Every hard drive melted internally. The video was leaked by a technician who printed still frames before the data was scrubbed. One of those frames reached Cho. She stared at it for hours, not at the creature, but at the patterns etched into its skin. Not scales, not ridges. Glyphs. The same as the ones from the mining rig. She enlarged the image, over and over, until her screen blurred from pixelation. And that's when she saw it. A map. Not of the world. Of what lay beneath it. Veins. Roots. Tunnels. A web stretching from trench to trench, from ancient seabed to volcanic core. This thing wasn't one entity. It was a network. A planetary-scale intelligence. Planted deep before humanity ever stood upright. And now, piece by piece, it was surfacing. Cater called again. We were wrong about the radiation. It wasn't just a trigger. It was a message, sent across light years. And Earth was the receiver. Someone out there knew. They knew what we buried here. And now, it's awake. The ocean didn't explode. It withdrew. Across the western Pacific, entire shorelines retreated by inches. Not a tsunami. Not a storm surge. Just the ocean pulling back, like something breathing in. Tide sensors went dark. Undersea cables went silent. And then, from the deepest points of the Mariana Trench, a single pulse shot outward, picked up by every listening device on Earth. It wasn't natural. It was timed. The pulse lasted 7 seconds and carried within it a perfect frequency match to an extinct marine microbe last recorded 2.7 billion years ago, before multicellular life. And embedded in its waveform was something else. Something terrifying. Our own genetic code. The message was clear now. It wasn't a warning. It was a check-in. A signal not meant for humanity, but for what lay beneath us, slumbering across fault lines and ocean trenches, wired into the planet's crust like nerve endings waiting for a command. And now that command had arrived. The sky had spoken, and Earth had answered. Governments scrambled, not to inform the public, but to prepare for collapse. Coastal militaries mobilized. Deep-sea surveillance satellites were repositioned. Underwater nukes were quietly armed. But all of it was theater. All of it came too late, because the sea had already begun to change. The water itself shifted. Its chemical balance altered. Sodium levels began to drop unnaturally. Strange biofilms appeared, spreading across the seafloor in vast, interconnected webs. The entire Pacific seemed to pulse with a new rhythm, one not dictated by tides or moons, but by something ancient and aware. In the Philippines, fishermen reported catching creatures they'd never seen, translucent, many-eyed things that bled light and dissolved in air. In New Zealand, whales beached themselves in perfect, concentric circles, their bodies humming with faint electromagnetic pulses long after death. And in Honolulu, Dr. Mariana Cho stood on a high cliff at 3:14 a.m., watching the tide breathe outward again, farther than any low tide recorded in history. She didn't need instruments anymore. She could feel it, the pressure beneath the Earth's skin, the hum in the bones, the way even her dreams no longer felt like her own. It wasn't just spreading through the ocean. It was spreading through us. Cognitive resonance, Cater had warned. A subtle form of parasitic synchronization. You didn't need to see it, or hear it. All it needed was proximity, a thought, a feeling, a shared frequency, a seed in the mind. She hadn't slept in days. Not because she feared the dreams, but because she feared what she might bring back from them. That morning, she received Cater's final message. A video, shaky, handheld, taken in darkness. He was in a tunnel somewhere deep below Geneva. Emergency lights flashed behind him. His breath was ragged, his voice thin. They're using us, Mariana. Like conduits. The radiation, they engineered it. Millions of years ago. It wasn't just a trigger. It was a broadcast signal meant to synchronize life on this planet, and meant to prepare the surface for their return. Our oceans are just their memory. The trenches, those aren't geological. They're locks. The camera turned briefly, and behind him, something massive shifted in the shadows. Something wet, rhythmic, pulsating through walls of stone. We were never alone, he whispered. We were never in charge. The feed ended in static. Cho didn't cry. She already knew. That evening, the first strike occurred. Not a missile, not a bomb, a hole. In the Western Pacific, just off the Mariana Trench, satellites recorded a sudden collapse of water, a cylindrical void, nearly 5 miles across, as if the ocean had been sucked downward. Naval sensors detected a vertical motion rising from the trench's core, traveling faster than any tectonic shift ever recorded. It wasn't magma, it was structure, and it was moving. Then came the sounds. No one who heard them could describe them properly. Some said it sounded like an organ being played in reverse. Others said it felt like a cathedral groaning under pressure. But all agreed, it was a noise. It was language. And every coastline that heard it began to vanish. Not in waves, in withdrawal. Cities didn't flood. They disappeared beneath tides that refused to return. As if the sea were reclaiming what it had once given up. In Washington, power flickered. In Moscow, skies turned violet. In Lagos, entire birds fell dead mid-flight. Across the globe, people experienced simultaneous nosebleeds, hallucinations, seizures. Some whispered things they couldn't possibly know. Star coordinates, ancient words, songs with no human language. The deep had breached, and in the silence that followed, Earth changed forever. Cho remained at her post in what was once the NOAA Pacific Warning Center, now abandoned. Outside, the ocean glowed at night, pulsing softly, like it was thinking. She opened her final log and spoke into the recorder. If anyone finds this, know that we did not fail to see it. We failed to understand it. We thought cosmic radiation was random, harmless, but it was a key, a signature only the ocean could read. They weren't just creatures. They were systems, minds stitched through miles of abyss, memories stored in trench and tide, and they've remembered who we are. She paused, or maybe who we were supposed to become. Behind her, the building creaked. Water lapped at the steps outside. She looked once more at the map Cater had pieced together from sonar and glyphs. It wasn't a prison. It wasn't even a warning. It was a blueprint, and humanity had only ever been part of the design. As the tide rose and the stars shifted above, Cho finally understood. This was not an invasion. This was a homecoming, and Earth was never ours.